Isn't it fun when the parents know you screwed up and they're just like, yeah, we're not going to lead you on, but they know. Yeah, that's always fun. So today, what I'm going to talk about again, going back, is Samuel 11 and 12. So let's start with a little bit of context here. Let's talk. Who is the person that we're talking about here? Is David. So David is a shepherd originally, and he was with his father. And in the beginning, he also worked for King Saul at the time, working in the court. Now he was in charge of doing a couple different things. One is he would bring supplies back and forth. Mainly in the Bible, we see that he brings it back and forth to his brothers during times of war. The other thing was is he used to play harp for Saul as well too. So can you imagine King David just that kind of thing inside of Saul's courts? And so one of the big stories that's with David is where we get David and Goliath. I'm sure a couple of people have heard that before. Yes, yes or yes. Yeah, of course. So David and Goliath. So a little bit of context on it. This big, heavy Philistine was challenging the Israelite army, and the kings back in the time, instead of saying let's have an all-out bloodbath, they said you pick your strongest guy, and we'll pick our strongest guy, and it'll be a one-on-one, and then whoever wins, of course, gets the victory of the spoils. So the Philistines draw Goliath, and the Israelites about crap their pants, and nobody stood up to it. There was a part in this story where no one would go, and it would be days upon days upon days would Goliath come out to the battlefield and go, come on, bring it, and everybody would basically cower and go back to their tents and just not do it. So David goes and he brings supplies to his brother, says, who's that guy? And then they said, well, that's Goliath, he's the biggest guy. Well, who's going to challenge him? Well, no one's going to challenge him. So what does he do? He goes to King Saul and says, I would like to challenge him. And because of the faith that David had, Saul said, all right, go for it. And David picked up 5 smooth stones, and that's where we get where David and Goliath actually met and had the competition. And David basically took that sling with the rocks and hit Goliath dead in the head. He was dead immediately, and then David then cut off Goliath's head inside of the story. It's a pretty cool story. And of course, my favorite part is why was there 5 stones? Well, because Goliath had 4 brothers. Pretty cool, right? Because he was going to say, F around and find out, right? You see a pattern with this, right? And so that's a pretty cool thing. And then on top of that, going fast forward a little bit more into the Bible, after Saul passed away, and I'm always mess this up, and Amalekite came up and actually said, I'm the actual king. David said, nah, killed the Amalekite. He became the new king. And so why was this that way? Is because David was also known as a man after God's own heart. He was a very, very strong believer because of his faith is what led him to defeat Goliath, and of course to be able to do it. There's even one verse. I know it's not in your page. By the way, I have 30 verses in here, so I got to go quick. 2 Samuel 6:14. King David is described as dancing with all his might before the Ark of the Covenant. Now, with all of his might, the context of it was he was basically naked, right? Because he wanted to show his devotion, and then, of course, symbolizing that God's perfection and going about his greatness. But now we're going to read into this man after God's own heart is now starting to decline, which is where we're going to get into the first one, which is 2 Samuel 11:1. So if you guys could read that for me, please. Awesome. Thank you. So to set the stage is that David has a lot of downtime inside of this. Now, there's nothing wrong with downtime. Gabby and I just spent 4 days out in St. Augustine. I'm going on a cruise tomorrow. Yippee. Going to Alaska in a couple days. I'm thrilled about that. There's nothing wrong with a little downtime, except for the fact that I think you all know the saying is that with idle minds, it's the enemy's playground, right? So and the reason why this is important, normally kings go out to battle, meaning that they follow the armies out there and they give commands and make sure everything is going well. They leave somebody in charge at home. But he said, no, I'm actually going to leave Joab in charge of this one. So just to kind of set the stage as to what is happening here. Next one, 2 through 4, please.
Late one afternoon, David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house. Then he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. And David sent and inquired about the woman. And one said, is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? So David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanliness. Then she returned to her house.
Thank you. The radio voice on them. It's insane. Thank you, boss. I know, it's crazy. So David's palace is higher than any other house. And so when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking of like the houses in Santorini, Greece, which is that one with all the white and blues right there, right? Now, this is something where I'm just like, you notice in that picture of Santorini that nobody is out on the terraces? Is because of privacy reasons, right? Now, back in the day, if you were a woman and you wanted to bathe, you wouldn't do it in the house. You needed some privacy. So where would you do? You would go onto the roof. And of course, whose house is higher? Well, David's house is higher. So he can now see everything, whether it be good or bad. And so the reason why this is important is because if you think of it like this, is that he's just not making sure the kingdom's good, right? You ever heard of peeping Toms, right? Now we got peeping Davids. So David is king, and he's not going to be denied of anything. And I think if you're a servant, you don't want to tell the king no. Why? Right? You're going to get your head off, right? And so David is now looking at this woman, and he basically says, "Who is she? I like her. Arrange it." And that's exactly where we see things go. Now, where David should have stopped is that's Uriah's wife. End of sentence, right? But of course, he lets the flesh kick in. He lets our sinful nature kick in as well, too. So it should have been enough to stop. But also, David had a history of this as well, too. We see in other parts of Samuel, and I really recommend y'all read all of 1 and 2, where he has an issue with polygamy, meaning he's got a lot of other wives. And he has other wives from Saul that he brought into his house. And when he won the battle against Goliath, he also got his wife from that as well, too. So he's got a lot of them. So he doesn't really see this as a problem, right? But it is. It's a big problem. So David could have said no, but of course he didn't. So he sent for her. They had physical relations in the ESV, and in the parentheses, this is why I put that in there. So we're reading from NIV, but in the parentheses is ESV that's in there. It says that she had been purifying herself from uncleanliness. Now, what does that mean? What that basically means is this, is that she had her period, and now she's coming off of her period, and they say that you can't, of course, have relations for a certain amount of days. And that basically is setting the stage. And why is this important? To say that Bathsheba wasn't pregnant to begin with. So that's setting the context. Does that all make sense so far? So now we know we're going into it. Next verse, verse 5, please. So that came from the Gen Z Bible, I'm guessing. So thank you. So she, it's not good, right? And so it doesn't sound. And by the way, this sounds like an episode of Maury, right? And when I was googling pictures of King, doesn't he look like Crash too? That's Springer, right? It could be Springer, could be Maury, right? But it looks exactly like Crash. I was just looking at this. I had to show Gabby this. I'm like, there's no way. It looks exactly the same. Just do the little nose up there, right? So but you get a sense of how long that the army has been gone for you to conceive and for you to find out that you're pregnant, right? This isn't a one, and this is a long period of time. So it's giving a lot of context into this as well, too. So we know that they've had relations. We know that she wasn't pregnant before. Now she's pregnant, and now we're leading into the next section. So we now know for certain that it's David's child. Does that all make sense so far? Good. All right. Next verse, 68, please.
Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." And Uriah went out to the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king.
Thank you. So again, David knows that it's his child and that she's pregnant, and he also knows that if he brings Uriah back, that maybe something would go on. So he's thinking, David's thinking, you know what I could do is I could bring Uriah back, make him feel at home, make him feel comfortable, let him get, some food in him, let him take a bath, let him just kind of chill, let him do whatever it is. And maybe brown chicken, brown cow, right? Something might happen. And then what would happen is then Bathsheba would give birth, and then Uriah would think, oh, that's my child. The setup is just crazy with this, and it's insane inside of it. So you already start to see the nature and the way that David is thinking about, how am I going to get out of this mess, right? How am I going to do it? It's a very shameful act. But this is, again, something that's human nature. I don't know about you, but I have tried to cover up my stuff a couple times, right? You make up stories, you try and do something that maybe not hurt somebody else's feelings. Maybe you did really, really, really bad, and you went, no, oh, that's not my thing, right? That happens. And that's just part of sinful nature. But you get to see David shaping into that. Next verse, 9 through 11, please.
They told David, Uriah did not go down to his house. David said to Uriah, did not come from Church, why did you not go down to the house? Uriah said to David, the ark of Israel and the my mother shall servants shall I go then go to my house?
Thank you. So what we see here is Uriah honoring the people that he left behind on the battlefield. So what he's saying is like, wait a minute, I'm not going to treat this like nothing has happened. My brothers are still on the battlefield. They're still going through it. I mean, and they're sleeping on the grounds because back then only like the generals and the people who were in charge would sleep in tents. So they're sleeping in the middle of the grass, looking up at the stars the whole time, right? And so this is kind of, and even give more context in this as well, too. Even the Ark of the Covenant, the symbol of God's presence, is in a tent. And David is saying, come back home and go back into your house and basically start living it up a little bit. And Uriah, being an honorable man and someone who actually has a couple morals to him, says, wait a minute, my brothers are back on the field fighting. I can't do that to them. So what he's going to do is he's going to do the honorable thing and basically still do post. He's not going to go out and drink. He's not going to spend time with his wife. He's not going to do anything because of his honor to his brothers, which I think is pretty cool. So he's not embracing the pleasures of the flesh. Next verse, 12 through 13.
Then David said to Uriah, remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day at the mess. And David invited him in, and he ate his presence and drank, so that he made him drunk. And in the evening he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his lord, but he did not go down to his house.
So David thought, I got one more chance at this, one more time. And what can I do? I'm going to get him boozed up, right? And maybe, just maybe, he might actually go back home and do something, right? In other words, he's trying to make Uriah, who is an honorable man, go against his own honor. The cover up is starting to build a lot here. And you see David is really starting to stoop down low, trying to think of how can I get out of this as much as I can. And so now he starts to opt for some drastic measures, which again, on the backside here, 14 through 21. It is a big one. I am sorry. So.
Morning, David wrote a letter to Joab, sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fight, and then draw back from him, that he may be struck down. And as Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant men. The men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among them fell. Uriah the Hittite also died. Then Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting. He instructed the messenger, when you have finished telling all the news about the fight to the king, then if the king's anger rises, and if he says to you, why did you go so near the city to fight? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, the son of Chruch? Did not a woman cast an upper millstone upon him from the wall so that he died at Thebes? Why do you go so near the wall? Then you shall say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also.
Thanks, Jan. So again, going back to this is, again, really, really important. But Joab says, if the king gets angry, do what you want. Where Joe's thinking, why were you so close to the wall? In other words, is this, and I'm reading KJV a little bit, but why was he so close to the wall? In other words, bro should have known better. In other words, he got himself killed. That's pretty crazy, wouldn't you think, right? And it's kind of setting up where the heart of David is right now. In other words, just say this: if this happens, oh yeah, yeah, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. And so, and I love this as well too. Inside of that, it says is that we all know the story of the son of Gideon became too close to the wall, and that woman threw a big stone off the top, and he cracked the skull. In other words, that woman's pretty strong too, right? But it's a ridiculous thing they get close to the wall. He should have known better. He really should have known better. So kind of it's on himself. That's kind of the way that they're playing this, right? A little bit crazy. Next verse for me, 22 through 25.
So the messenger went and came and told David all that Joab had sent him to tell. The messenger said to David, "The men gained an advantage over us and came out against us in the field, but we drove them back to the entrance of the gate. Then the archers shot at your servants from the wall. Some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also." David said to the messenger, "Thus shall you say to Joab, do not let this matter displease you, for the sword devours now one and now another. Strengthen your attack against the city and overthrow it, and encourage him."
So David's response again, I think, is extremely shameful in this one, because it's basically saying like, this is war. People die. It is what it is, right? So zero mourning inside of it. Zero mourning. He got a guy killed. Zero mourning. That's extremely shameful. But I also think the response is extremely callous. It kind of reminds me of like when you talk to like TV reporters and stuff, and people aren't overreacting. They're kind of like, well, he was a good neighbor. I gave him a cup of sugar. I don't know what happened. He was such a good guy. He kept his music down low. He didn't play any crazy Hispanic music at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like there was nothing going on. And it kind of is like, oh, next slide for me. It's not loading. All right, fine. It's kind of like that. So hide your kids, hide your wife, right? So you got to be kidding me on this one. So David did it to a man, and again, he was a man after God's own heart. He was extremely calloused. And the way that the text goes is that if you look at the Greek on this one, he was extremely calm with the nature as well too in the Greek on this one. And so again, it was about the death of a righteous man. It's a very sinful nature. Next verse for me, please, 26 through 27.
When the wife that she lamented over her husband, and when the morning was over, David sent and brought her to his house. She came and wife and her son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord.
Thank you. So notice is that she lamented. Now, in the term lamented, it means is that she broke down, really crying and feeling the loss in the morning of her husband, because again, she was like, this isn't something that had to happen. That's kind of the Greeking on this as well too. And because of her husband died. But the one text I really want to focus in on this, it said, but the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. Notice is that nobody was none the wiser of this going on, except for God. God knew everything was going on, which is where we get the omnipotence of God, the full knowing of God. And the thing that's important about this is, even though it hurt Uriah, killed Uriah, right? It hurt Bathsheba. It kind of sent some struggles into the camps at the army. Nobody really knew what was happening, but God knew the whole thing. And so I want to read, I didn't put this on here because I know Matt would yell at me if there's 3 pages, but I want to read to you the beginning of 2 Samuel 12. And it said, now the Lord sent Nathan. I want to kind of stop right there. Who is Nathan? So back in Moses' day, you had Moses in the very beginning, after the Israelites had been freed from Egypt. They're now kind of wandering through the desert. Moses becomes basically the only judge, and he's basically taking on every single case that's going on. And it could be some really, really crazy stuff, or one where, hey, he took my bike, right? And I want it back. So he was doing with big stuff and little stuff. And so in Exodus, we actually see where we get to have the different judges, the different types of ranking for judges. So lower judges, middle judges, higher judges, and then Moses. And so we get to see that form going on. So who is Nathan? Nathan, according to the context that is inside of here, was a close advisory friend and one of those judges in the higher courts. And so it says, and the Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, there are two men in a certain town, meaning, oh, and by the way, the context into this one, he's bringing a case and he's asking David, what should I do with this one, right? And he said, and the Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, there were two men in a certain town, one rich, one poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one ewe, which means really tiny, lamb he brought. He raised it and grew it up with him and his children. It was shared. It shared his food and drank from the cup and even slept in his arms. But it was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare the meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one had come. David burned with anger, and the man said to Nathan, and against the man, and he said to Nathan, as surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for the lamb 4 times over, because he did such a thing and had no pity. Like the verses before. You see the context of it. And it's funny. He's looking at this as a judge. David's looking at this as a judge. And he knew that the law at the time, if he had taken one lamb from someone who was poor when someone had plenty, that he would actually have been put to death. And so when he's looking at this, he's going, this guy should be killed. Immediately put the rich man to death because of what he did. But then Nathan kind of drops a bomb on him, and he basically, oh yeah, and so the other context in this as well too, this is kind of going back to, do not worry about the speck in someone else's eye when you have the log in yours. So that's the context, and Nathan drops the bomb on him, and it says, if you guys could read 12 verse 7, please.
This is what the and all this been too you struck down the sword, killed him with the sword. Now therefore the sword will never depart from your eyes from me. Took the life. This is what the Lord says. I am going to bring you before your very eyes, take your life, and give them close, and you will speak of your life. You did in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight.
Can I stop you right there? Because I'm going to finish off on this verse 1 second. I kind of messed it up there. But go back to verse 9 and 10 for me. Thank you, by the way, Phyllis. Verse 9 and 10. On verse 9, it says, you despised the word of the Lord. In verse 10, it says, because you despised me. Now, this again is the Lord speaking through Nathan. See, it hurt Bathsheba. It killed Uriah. It hurt the Israelites in the kingdom. But it actually, God took this one personal. He took it extremely personal. Why have you despised me, the word of the Lord? Because you despised me. And so when we sin, it's not just about the people that we hurt, right? And it's kind of easy because let's say I'm talking to Matt and I do something, I piss him off, I get him angry, whatever the case may be. I can be able to address him and ask him for forgiveness for that sin, and we can be able to do it. But that sin could also be something where it greatly affects God. Greatly affects it. And so it's not just this, there's the effect in heaven as well too. And we see this as well in Acts 9, 3-4. I have it on mine. I'll just read it for you. This is about Saul, who later became Paul. Now, Saul at the time was persecuting Christians. Basically, he was killing them left and right. And in Acts 9, it says this. It says, as he neared Damascus, meaning Saul, on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Do you see the context going on in verse 9 and 10 in this one as well too? Why do you persecute me? Not the Christians who passed away, but God himself. Why do you persecute me? And so he was, again, now Paul later on, he had to basically live with the fact that he had killed everything. In other words, it was the consequences of the actions that he had done up to this time. But the Lord took it personal and he took it extremely relational. And I want to read again verse 11 and 12 just to kind of outline this. It says, this is what the Lord says, out of your own household, I'm going to bring calamity upon you. Before your eyes, I will take the wives and give them to the one who is close. I'm going to pause right there. In a bracket, I don't know if I have it on this sheet. I don't have it on this sheet, but in the American English Standard Version, the actual term is neighbor, right? Now, if we read a little bit later on into 2 Samuel, who does that neighbor become? It becomes David's son. So it's really close to heart. It's really, really close. And so God is kind of holding this back. He knows what's happening, but he's holding it back of saying, hey, this could be your kid, right? Because of the consequences that could happen. And so where am I? I will take your wives and I will give them to the one who is close to you, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight, and you did it in secret, but I will do things in broad daylight before Israel. In other words, he's saying, jigs up. We now know what's happening, right? So now you have to suffer with those consequences. Phyllis, if you can finish verse 13, that'd be great. I like the way you said that too. Not gonna die. So one of the main reasons why David is known as a man after God's own heart is because he has a teachable spirit. He knows that he really screwed up. He effed around, he found out. He really messed up. And because of his teachable spirit, he became humble and became broken and has said this, I have sinned against the Lord. He recognized it immediately. And notice when it says is that he sinned against the Lord, it's not against Bathsheba, it's not against Uriah, it's against the Lord himself. He knew that immediately. And he knew that he should have been put to death. But then when you have Nathan said, it says, the Lord has taken away your sin, you are not going to die. This is very important, especially when you're going into the American Standard Version on this one. It says, he has taken away your consequences, right? Or sorry, taken away your punishments, not the consequences. You're taking away your punishments, not just the consequences that are inside of here. It is an important distinction because we've heard some people that have said, why would God allow this to happen to me? I don't know about you. I've done some stuff that was my own problem. And it wasn't because God was like, I'm going to punish you. It's because we've done some stuff that is our own challenges, right? So it's an important distinction. So why has God punished you? Have you ever heard of that before? Why is God punishing me? It's not. It's just the consequences of our action. Go back to the first verse on the first page, Galatians 6 and 7. Somebody read that for me again. Exactly. So God has taken away your sin, and it is not punished your sin. So the question then comes into play, when does God punish sin? Romans 3:23 through 25. Next verse for me, please, up there. Put it up on the screen. Everybody reads 3 through 23 through 24. I like the last one at the end. I'm going to read it for you. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and all are justified freely by his grace through the redemptiveness that came by Christ Jesus. God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood to be received by faith. He did this to demonstrate his righteousness because in his forbearance he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. We still got to live with the consequences of our sin. We still got to do it, right? But the sin, when is it punished? It was taken care of on the cross. When was our sin taken care of? On the cross. Everybody's sin has been taken care of on the cross. And so the next question is, well, if the sin has already been taken care of, do I still need to ask forgiveness? Dang Skippy, right? Why is that? It's because when we're asking for forgiveness and we're asking, again, that's why the F comes into play. The F around found out could also be forgiveness around and find out as well, too. The forgiveness part comes into this is it's healing the relationship between you and God. It's healing that relationship. I already talked about this, so, I screw up a lot, especially in relationships, right? Everybody say hi to Gabby. I know she's embarrassed. Yeah. Thank you. By the way, 6 months we've been together on the 4th, so that's pretty cool. Pray for her, please. All right, so I know, right? And she started beet red too, which is great. 6 So we're all saved by grace, and the thing is I keep messing up a lot. Going back to David, David's struggle was women, right? Well, what struggle do most people have with? I mean, everybody say what's on your mind. What do most people struggle with? Money, relationships, sin in general. Okay. Anxiety, traffic. Oh, Gary. Gambling, porn, alcohol, marijuana, food, especially in our culture now, vaping, men, women, drugs, etc. Right? Parents. But everybody has a struggle. Would everybody agree with us, right? Right? Everybody has a struggle. I'm reminded of an old Puritan pastor. His name was Thomas Brooks. And Thomas Brooks wrote a book. It was called Precious Remedies Against Satan's Devices. And what he said, I highly recommend this book. It's incredible. And in his book, one of the things that he says is, and I want to get the quote right, is that Satan is like a fisherman. He always is going to have a hook, regardless of what it is, but everybody has a different bait. The bait that you have is going to be the thing that attracts you to it. What is that thing? It could be anything. It can be women, it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be whatever the case may be. And that hook is then going to get you, and then he's going to reel you up and he's going to bang you over the head, right? So that I highly recommend this book. It's great. So he doesn't care what bait you like, he just wants to knock you over the head, right? Precious remedies against Satan's devices. Precious remedies against Satan's devices. And so we don't want to go as believers and basically say, well, I can't believe they struggle with that. I mean, that must be crazy what they're going through right now, right? And I got to sit down with a bunch of band brothers, and there's a lot of things that I keep hearing guys tell, and the stories are just gut wrenching, and they really just knock you back to the earth and go like, wow, there's always a bigger fish, right? Somebody's always got something going on, and we don't want to treat them like, oh, that's nasty, and abandon them, right? We're all going through something. Again, going back to Romans, it says in 3:23, it says we all have fallen short. So we're all nasty, right? We're just nasty in unique ways, right? We all got a struggle going on. I'm sweaty right now, so maybe not. I want to hold your hand. Oh, it's a good song too. Forgot about that. So what can we do? What things can we do? Well, number one is we got to identify the struggles for me. From the Band of Brothers, I heard a wild bunch of things. And so all sorts of struggles with all sorts of people. Identify the things that are a struggle for you. What is it? Right? Now, you don't have to say it, but what is the thing that's really holding you back? What if it's drugs? What if it's alcohol? What if it's the things? What if it's aggressively driving and saluting people? Love you. Right? What are the things, right? We all got our things, and you all got to be aware of it as well too. So identifying the problem is absolutely necessary if you're going to destroy it. The other thing is run to the Father. I'm going to read this verse. It's Psalm 55:22. It says, cast your burdens onto the Lord and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. So recognizing that we have the sin, we should just go right to Papa. Go right to the Father. Hey, this is something that's going on. It even says it in scripture as well too. It says, do not contain your sin or control your sin, because what's going to happen if you're still around it, it can still bait you and hook you. You got to run to Papa. You got to run to the Father. And so I'm reminded of a verse or a song as well too. I know we got a bunch of musicians in the room. It's by Cody Carnes, and the lyrics go, I run to the Father. I fall into grace. I'm done with hiding. No reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon. My soul needs a friend. So I'll run to the Father again and again and again and again. Run to Papa. So that way we can be able to have our sins forgiven, and we can begin the healing process and be able to correct the things that are going on. Third thing is the seeking wise counsel. So I'm going to read a verse. It's Proverbs 12:15. It says, the way the fool seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. I got a couple guys that I go to when I'm really going through something right there. I know Jan, the gentleman who came up last, I don't know, it was a couple months ago, like 4 or 5 months ago. Yeah. Jan Shear from the Band of Brothers, he talked about forgiving forward, which, by the way, we have one book left. Take it, please. But him and I have been real foxhole buddies. When we're going through some stuff right now, when I want to talk to somebody who is much older and much wiser, he's 75. He's kicking butt too. But when I want to go, because he's lived life, he's had experience. So a lot of the younger guys, we need to go to these people that have gone through life, Christian life. Let me clarify that, Christian life, right? And of course, I talk to Matt all the time. Now, one thing I tell Matt is I go like, if I ever really F around, you have the right to correct me. And he's done it a couple times. He goes, dude, you're an idiot. Thanks, right? And it's just, but he's a foxhole buddy. I can go to him. Who do you have as a foxhole buddy that you can run to? Who do you have? And if you don't have somebody, maybe that should be one of the things that you need to identify to get corrected, right? And I'm reminded of Matthew chapter 4, verse 19. It says, and he, meaning Jesus, said to them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Just like the Thomas Brooks said, the enemy will bait us like fish. So why don't we be fishers of men and bring them to Jesus? I'm going to end on this, and then I'm going to open it up for discussion. There's a very controversial pastor. I love him to death, though. His name is Mark Driscoll. And what he says is so don't wound your sin. Don't hide your sin. Don't try to control your sin. If Jesus died for it, then what? Kill it. Because if you don't kill it, it's going to grow up and it's going to kill you and it's going to lead to death. Again, going back to the one verse that's in here in 2 Samuel, it says, Nathan replied to him, the Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die. Run to dad, run to papa. Going back to this as well, too. So if Jesus died to this, you need to join him and put it to death, which means it can't be like, I only get drunk on Fridays. I only smoke when I'm stressed. I only watch the P word, because we got kids in here, when I'm bored. I only steal money when it's from the government. I understand that one. And when you make an exception, that exception overtakes your life and it becomes your life. Kill it.